Hey guys, welcome to Finances with Ferg with Ryan Ferguson, of course. Who else would it be? This is episode 4 on the TFSA and RRSP. Going to cover everything you need to know about these accounts and how these are actually investment accounts rather than just savings accounts like the S in the name might imply. And yes, thank you for noticing, I did get a haircut. Appreciate that. All right, moving along, of course, let's start with some housekeeping, kind of let you know what this is, why you're here, and what we're doing. Just kind of highlighting a little bit about the sessions, right? So we do one every week on Wednesday nights. Probably going to take a break throughout spring and summer once these are done, as I'm slowly realizing that people don't want to be on their computer at 8 o'clock in the spring and summer. So this will be the last kind of group of sessions, or the last season, I guess we'll call it, for the next little bit. But as you know, because you're watching this, I record them and you can check them out anytime you need. If you do want to stay connected, you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram. I'll be posting that info at the end here. Shoot me a message, send me a follow. Would love to connect with you on social media as well. If you are a part of the sessions and a part of my email list, you will also get some resources, cheat sheets, updates on the current state of the market, and just kind of cool things around personal finance that I find. I send it out every once in a while. I wouldn't say it's spammy. I haven't had any complaints yet. I don't really crush the emails by any means, but when I do come across something that I think would be important for the group, I do like to send them out. So feel free to message me if you want to join the list as well. These are relevant for everybody, right? All Canadians, doesn't really matter on the province. There will be minor changes from province to province, but these are good for all ages. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions specific to your situation. Also, trying to grow the list. I think we're currently at 98 people, which is insane to think that we've gotten that many in just the last 5 months. But we're trying to grow even further. So bring your friends, bring your family. We've got gift cards and giveaways for people that do share the love. What are we going to be talking about specifically today? As always, we're going to pick up where we left off, give you guys a quick summary on where we came from to get to this point. Going to talk briefly about investing and saving, talk about the TFSA, of course, all the need to knows about that, the RRSP, same thing, everything that you would need to know about that, whether you're a beginner or moderate or intermediate investor. You'll get some good knowledge here, I think. Then we're going to compare the two side by side, talk about when you might use one versus the other, and then, of course, how can you open these, right? How can you start taking advantage of them? Where can you go? Things of that nature, okay? So, picking up where we left off, if you joined any of my previous sessions, or not any, but if you joined my last session, or even just watched a recording, you would have seen this very budget example of how a TFSA and RRSP works, but it's the simplest, most entertaining, and my favorite way of explaining how the TFSA and the RRSP works. So I'm not going to go into great detail. What the idea here is, the box is the account, the slots are the investments. You can't get an investment without first going into the account. Just like you can't put an item into that slot without it also going into the box. So the idea being, you go out, you open up an account, a TFSA or an RRSP. If you just put the money in there, you're not really using the account how you should. You need to also make sure that you're buying investments through the accounts. Okay? Go check out some of my previous videos if you want to get more detailed, or of course just reach out, ask me. I can kind of break down how that works. This, again, coming from previous videos, go watch it if you want more details, but basically this is just showing what would happen to your money if it were invested versus it were just sitting in a savings account. And the takeaway here is investing over the long run beats saving every single time. If you look on the right, you can see what $10,000 has become after 40 years. 3 times invested, 1 time saved. All right, inflation is what's killing your savings. We really want to make sure that we're investing our money, not just saving it when we're talking long term. Okay, moving along, we're right into it today. This might be my quickest video yet, but we'll see. TFSA, the tax-free savings account. Pretty popular, pretty well-known account here in Canada. Let's talk about some of the details. So what is it? A TFSA is a registered, which basically means tax advantaged, general purpose savings vehicle. I think it should be called an investment vehicle, honestly, but anyway, that allows Canadians aged 18 and older to earn tax-free investment income to more easily meet lifetime savings goals or needs. I don't know why I switched those words. Must have something on my mind. Anyways, let's break this down a little bit further and actually kind of give you what you need to know about these accounts. All right. When putting money into the TFSA, it is not tax deductible. So what that means is come tax season, you don't claim anything you put into the TFSA. Doesn't work that way. It's not going to reduce your taxes. Not for the TFSA. Okay? Here's the best part about the TFSA. Investment income and capital gains are tax-free even when withdrawn. So what does this mean? This means that if you, going back to the previous slide, if you had put $10,000 into an investment through the TFSA, that's the key part, through the TFSA, and that grows to $1 million, let's say, you just made $990,000 tax-free. So when you withdraw that, you do not need to pay taxes on it. That is yours, that is tax-free capital gain, tax-free income. Okay, very, very cool. But you need to keep in mind there are annual contribution limits. Okay, so every year there is an updated contribution limit. For the last few years, it has stayed pretty consistent at $6,000. Hasn't always been that. So as you'll notice on the second line there, the number 81,500. That's because every year the numbers have changed a little bit. So what this is telling you is that every year you can contribute up to $6,000. And then you're done. You can't contribute any more. Unless there have been years where you haven't maxed out your contribution room or your contribution limit. Those carry forward. So for example, let's say someone who was 18 in 2009 or any time before that, and they haven't contributed anything to a TFSA, that means they would be able to contribute if they wanted to and if they were able to. 81,500 all at one time. Okay, so the contribution room always carries forward. What you want to do is max this out as quickly as you can. Why? That means you are taking advantage of this in the best way. Okay, here's something to keep in mind as well. Any withdrawn amounts from the TFSA can be recontributed to future years without affecting your contribution limit. So what I'm talking about here is, let's say for example, someone has maxed it out every year and they've even maxed it out this year. Okay, so they have 81,000, and this is assuming there's been no growth. Probably not happening, but let's just assume. So they've got $81,500 currently in their TFSA. They're maxed out, they can't put anything more in. Now let's say they needed to withdraw $10,000 today. So now they've got $71,500. They can't put that $10,000 back in. No, Siri, this wasn't for you. You can't put that $10,000 back in until next year. Okay? So let's say you had $76,500 going into 2022. You immediately put $6,000 in. You've maxed out. You cannot put anything more in. Even if you take money out, you cannot contribute anything more this year. Now next year, you'll get the new contribution limit, let's say it's $6,000. You will also be able to put $10,000 back in should you want to. Okay? That's what that bullet point is talking about there. Don't over-contribute if you can help it, right? Any over-contribution that you put, so if you go above the limit, you will be taxed at 1% per month. So you're just giving away money. Don't do it. You can have, this is a very common misconception, so hopefully going to clear that up today. You can have multiple TFSA accounts, okay? You can have one with your bank. You can have one with Wealth Simple. You can have one with the guy who hosts Finances with Ferg. It's up to you. You can have as many as you want. What you need to keep in mind is that the contribution limit still applies. So if you've got 2 TFSAs, you don't get 81.5 plus 81.5 in terms of your contribution room. You get 81.5 over the 2. Okay, that can be all in one and none in the other. That can be half and half. It's your call, but you have to keep that in mind if you have multiple TFSA accounts. Okay, here's kind of a cool one. Another benefit of getting married. Funds can be given to a spouse or common law partner for them to invest in their TFSA. Now, of course, you're going to want to really love them. You're going to want to really trust them. You're going to want to hope that you'll stay together for the long term. But why you can do this is, let's say one partner has maxed out theirs and the other partner won't be. You can start giving money to them so that they can contribute to their TFSA. So you're both growing together. Okay? And then at the bottom here are all the different types of investments you can buy through the TFSA. I believe we covered this in one of our last episodes around the investments 101, so go back and check them out. But those are what you can invest in through the TFSA. Switching gears over to the RRSP. This is the Registered Retirement Savings Plan. Let's talk about this one. All right. An RRSP is a registered, again, tax advantaged, retirement savings and investing vehicle. Oh, I threw investment in here. Perfect. Didn't do that on the last one. For employees and self-employed in Canada. And we'll talk about this here as well. Unlike the TFSA, this one is tax deductible, which means come tax season, you claim, or you admit, I guess, you say how much money you invested into your RRSP this year. Why? So it'll reduce your taxes. How it does that, let's say you make $100,000 a year, okay? You are going to pay taxes like you make $100,000 a year. Of course, the government's going to get theirs. If you contribute 20 grand into your RRSP, what that does to your taxes is it makes it look like you have made $20,000 less. So instead of being taxed at $100,000, you will now be taxed at $80,000. Even though you're still making 100 grand, this is how the RRSP works. Very, very powerful, very important investment vehicle to take advantage of if you are a high net income earner, okay? High net worth individual. Similar, but still different to the TFSA, investment income and capital gains are tax-free until withdrawn. So what that means is during the lifespan of the investment, you won't be paying tax on the growth while it's still invested, while it's still in the RRSP. But if you go to take money out of the RRSP, that is when you will be taxed. Okay, so you need to be strategic when you're taking money out of the RRSP. There are annual contribution limits similar to the TFSA. It's a little bit different for the RRSP. The limit is 18% of your income or $29,210, whichever value is less. For most people, it's probably going to be that 18% of your income because most of the time that is what's less. Okay? Similar to the TFSA, any unused contribution room does carry forward. This is only until you're 71 though. You can over-contribute by $2,000 without penalty. This is more of a room for error type of situation. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but if you do happen to go over by accident, not the end of the world as long as it's less than $2,000. Similar to the TFSA, you can have multiple RRSP accounts, right? You can transfer money between them without issue. You won't be taxed as long as it's to an RRSP. RRSP and TFSA, you can't do that. You will be taxed. So make sure it's RRSP to RRSP, like accounts is the term. But again, the contribution limit still applies. All right. As mentioned previously, it is taxed, like your money that you pull out of the RRSP is taxed when you withdraw it. Okay? Do not withdraw early from your RRSP. Do not do it before retirement. You will be taxed. You will also be penalized. So we do not want to do that. All right. The goal with the RRSP is long term. We're planning for our retirement in our 50s or 60s, whenever you happen to retire. That is when you pull out the money. Why? Because you are probably earning less income at that time, which means you are going to be taxed less than you would normally be taxed. That's a very quick and dirty, high-level strategy for the RRSP, but that's why we wait until later in life. Okay. Now there are a couple times where you can take money out without being taxed. All right. Let me get my YouTube fuel. The first one's home buyer's plan. All right. What this allows you to do is pull out $35,000 for your first time home purchase. All right. It's tax free. It's penalty free. Helps Canadians buy a house, if anyone even can afford to buy a house anymore. What this allows you to do is take that out tax-free, and you have 15 years to pay that back. As long as you pay that back within 15 years, you won't have to pay tax on it. There's no penalties. Okay? Similar situation, but this one's called the Lifelong Learning Plan, where you can take $10,000 out to go back to school, take a course, get some credits, whatever, but you've got 10 years to pay it back. Okay? Now this is a little bit old, but March 1st, 2022 was the 2021 contribution deadline. Assuming things stay consistent, it'll also be March 1st for next year. And then at the bottom there, same as the TFSA, you can get the same investments that you would here through the RRSP. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about comparing them. When you might use one versus the other. Feel free to pause the video and take note. But here's kind of the rule of thumb, or here's what I tell my clients. TFSA is more for, it can be long-term for sure. I use mine in a long-term setting, but for the most part, TFSA is going to be used for short-term and medium-term investing. Okay, if you need your money before retirement, use the TFSA. All right. If you are planning for retirement or you've got long-term needs, you're not worried about the money right now, go into the RRSP. Okay. Why? You get tax advantages by investing into the RRSP, so you want to take advantage of them when you can. Now, when it comes to income, there are maybe more reasons to use the RRSP if you make a certain income. I feel like the break-even point, and what I recommend to my clients is if you're making more than 50 grand a year, you should be contributing to your RRSP to help you get into a lower tax bracket, to help you save money on taxes. Okay? If you make less than 50 grand, you're not going to be getting as many benefits from the RRSP, so I recommend people to just keep it in the TFSA if you're making less than 50 grand. Okay? Well, by this point, you're probably thinking, man, these sound pretty darn good. I want one. Gimme, gimme, gimme. All right, so here's some places that you can go. This one's, I think, kind of obvious. This is where most people would go, as they don't realize that there are other options out there. But you can go to your bank, right? BMO, RBC, TD, Tangerine, Scotia, whatever else is out there. You can go to them. You can walk in off the street and just open one there with them. These are typically going to be passively managed, which means there's not really anybody paying attention to it. There's no fund manager taking a look and moving your money around when they see fit. What you're going to do is one of two things. Maybe you will sit down with someone and maybe they'll choose investments with you. Not likely. What's probably going to happen is they're going to throw you into some fund based on your risk tolerance, send you at the door, here you go. But it's going to be passively managed, meaning it's just kind of sitting there. It's still invested, but they're not going to move your money around. Okay. Typically, what I find, this type of management strategy will have lower returns. There are, of course, lower fees. Why? Because the fees are what pay the people to watch your money and move it around. If there's no one there watching it and moving it around, you're going to pay a lower fee. Typically, there are less options, right? This scenario where you just walk into the bank and say, hey, guys, I want to open up a TFSA and need some investments. They're probably going to offer you 2 to 3 options. They might have, well, they'll definitely have more, but for the average person, they're gonna just kind of get you in, get you out quick. But it's a comfortability play. right? People typically trust banks. I'm learning more and more now, being in the industry, that a lot of people don't. But people will typically trust banks, and more importantly, they'll typically trust their local advisor, the person that they've come to work with, come to know. So that is a benefit of working with the bank, is that comfortability, right? If you're going to be having people work with your money, you want to make sure you can trust them. You can go to a broker. This is what I am. Not saying you have to come to me, but there are other brokers out there. I'm pretty darn good, not going to lie. But you can also go to someone like me or another broker out there to open up these accounts. All right. Just like the bank, there are passively managed funds, which will keep the fees low, which will mean there isn't going to be someone monitoring your funds. But with a broker, you also have the opportunity to have your to have your money actively managed, right? This is having someone. This is when you see those pictures of those daisy-chained monitors, where you've got like 6 to 8 monitors, and someone's watching all the charts and the graphs and looking at money, or looking at the returns. This is active management. A fund manager, a team of people, is actively looking at their fund, making sure that it's invested in the right place so that they can try to make as much money as they can and slow down the losses of money, right? You guys probably know, if you're paying attention to the stock market, that the stock market is getting hammered right now, right? What an actively managed fund can do is help protect from some of those losses. Now, that's not to say that you won't go down sometimes with an actively managed fund, but more often than not, you can combat huge losses by working with someone that's actively managing the fund. Okay? Because there is someone constantly watching, paying attention, you do have an opportunity for higher returns. You will also inevitably probably be paying higher fees. You're paying someone basically to make sure you're making more money. You will typically have more options by going to a broker. A broker, just like a real estate broker or a mortgage broker, they partner with many different institutions to give you more options. You'll typically get better purchasing power, right? So instead of you going to an institution yourself, what you're doing through a broker is going to someone that works with hundreds and thousands of clients through their company. So these institutions will typically give a broker more options, better investments, better returns, better fund managers, which again goes back to you have the opportunity for higher returns. The only thing really, well, I mean, if fees matter to you, and I'm going to talk to you here in a second on why fees might not need to matter for you, but it is new, right? It can be uncomfortable to trust someone that you maybe don't know with your money. So that is, I guess, a negative or a con of working with a broker, is you got to make sure you trust them, right? I would never recommend someone to work with me or any other broker if you didn't trust that person, if they didn't sound like they had your best interest in mind, and if they didn't sound like they knew what they were talking about. Test them out a little bit. Sit down with them, have some conversations, build that trust before you're going to work with someone, okay? And then your other options, you can just do self-directed investing through an app. You've probably heard a lot of these names and a lot of these commercials out there. Wealthsimple, Questrade, in the States there's Robinhood. I'm sure there's many, many more. But you can just download an app and do it yourself. You do have an option to do passive or active, right? You can just have your money sit there in some random investment and it'll just kind of do what it does. You can have it actively managed, where there are fund managers that will pay attention. Typically what I've found is that you have high stock options. So there are many different many different stock equity options you can buy. Not as many funds, right? A broker or a bank will have more funds than they do stocks, or at least they'll just have a lot more funds. Drawback to this is you got to pay attention to it, right? Like you got to be educated. You got to know what's happening in the stock market. You've got to be paying attention to what different industries are doing, what is going on in the greater economy, the greater kind of world, basically, so that you can follow and move your money should you need. Don't get me wrong, you can just stick your money in there and hope for the best. But if you're going to do this, just like driving a car, you got to know what you're doing, right? If you don't know what you're doing, I highly recommend you get someone to help you. At least at the beginning, help guide you and show you what to do, so that while you've got a little bit of skin in the game, you're learning, you're understanding, you're knowing what to look for. So if you do decide you want to do this on your own, you've got a better chance at it. Italian hand, what about the fees, Ferg? Right? You were talking about fees and you're going to talk about why it won't matter. Well, let me tell you why I think fees don't matter in some instances, okay? Got two scenarios here, all right? You've got $10,000 and you need to choose where to put your money. You can put your money in a passive fund, right? Let's say for 1 year. I don't recommend people to invest for just 1 year, but let's just say 1 year. And because it's passively managed, as I mentioned, you'll typically get a lower return. So in this passive fund, Fund P, you are going to get a 6% return after 1 year. There's no fee on this, all right? What would happen to that $10,000 is you would now have $10,600. Great, money went up and I didn't pay a fee. Sweet. Let's see what would happen if you went into Fund A, which is an actively managed fund, all right? $10,000, except this time you're getting a 13% gross return, all right? So that's before the fee is taken. Fund manager takes their fee, and it's going to be different for every different fund, every different manager, but let's just say 3% for round numbers. What that would mean is you would then get a 10% net return. All right, that's still, even with paying a fee, that's more than 6%. So your money would actually be $11,000. Oh shoot, that's $400 more. Not bad. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but I hate paying for delivery. I hate paying fees when I don't need to. And it's only $400. Fair enough. But what happens over time, right? What happens with more money? Let's talk about that. What happens if it's $50,000 over 5 years? Well, same returns, same fees in a passively managed fund. That 50 grand will become just under 67. After 5 years, here's where it starts ramping up and getting crazy. This is how compounding works. With that 10% net return, even though you're paying that 3% fee, you are now making you've now made $80,500 as opposed to $67,000. That's about $13,500 more dollars by investing the same amount over the same amount of time. That's where it really starts making a difference. But we're long-term investors, right? We're here for the long game. So let's take a look at that $50,000 over a 10-year period. I don't have it up, I'm just talking. In the passive fund, you would only have $89,500. In the actively managed fund, you would have $129,687. Okay? It does matter where your money is. It does matter keeping it invested over long term. It does not matter what the fees are if the returns are higher. Okay? That's what you need to keep in mind when you're looking around for where you're going to invest your money. And as promised, as always, here's my contact information. If you ever want to chat, if you ever have questions, if you want to see what becoming a client of mine looks like, give me a shout. Would love to connect with you. Would love to help you become financially free as well. See you next week, guys.